The sea was not always mapped. There was a time when the ocean stretched endlessly unmarked and unconquered. It swallowed ships like crumbs, silenced names with a single wave, and left behind only stories, half-truths, tangled in seaweed, barnacled with fear. They say if you stand alone on a cliff as the sun sinks and the tide rises, you might hear something. Not the crashing waves, not the wind, but a memory, a hum older than language. Because the ocean remembers. Long before satellite images and steel vessels, men set out in boats of oak and hope. They carried saints around their necks, candles in their pockets, and fear in their bones. Beyond the familiar shores lay waters unnamed, unclaimed. And in those waters, things waited. Things that had names, and things that did not. In Norway, they feared the Kraken. In Japan, it was Akorokamui. In the South Pacific, Teweka. Even in the icy north, Jormungandr, stirred biting its own tail beneath the world. These creatures didn't just appear in dreams. They were charted in logbooks, carved into ship rails, whispered across ports in cracked voices and salt-soaked tongues. What do you believe lives beneath the waves we dare not sound? Why does every coastal people from opposite ends of the earth describe the same thing? A beast with arms like ships, eyes like storm-racked moons, and hunger as deep as the trench itself. One man wrote in 1678, "The sea lifted in a swell not born of wind. Something rose, and I turned away. I do not know if we lived by its grace or its disinterest." He returned with a broken mast and missing crew. No one asked questions. They didn't need to. The water had spoken. If you're watching this now, I ask you, what stories were told in your family about the ocean? Were there places considered cursed or creatures unnamed? Leave them in the comments. Let's gather these echoes before they vanish. Fear, when shared, becomes lore. The truth is, sailors were not weak. They were not naive. They saw what they saw. They named what they feared, not to exaggerate, but to remember. Because memory is the last defense against the unknown. There are logs from French corsairs describing sea bishops who rose from the depths and blessed the dying. Portuguese texts warn of underwater bells that chime just before a storm and disappear when approached. Inuit tales speak of Sedna, goddess of the sea, her hair tangled with the dead. And these weren't metaphors, they were warnings. Even modern scientists acknowledge we know more about space than the deepest parts of our own oceans. There are trenches we've never touched, creatures we've never filmed, sounds recorded by hydrophones that remain unexplained clicks, groans, mechanical howls. Some say it's ice shifting. Others say if it's them, the ones we forgot, the ones that wait. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets, not just in sound, but in understanding. Pressure builds, light dies, and instinct wakes. It tells you you do not belong here. And still we keep going. Some believe these monsters are reflections, our fears made flesh, that they represent isolation, madness, the crushing weight of the unknown. But if so, why do they leave claw marks on wooden hulls? Why do they tear nets? Why do they scream? Symbols don't scream. In 1913, a Russian trawler reported an encounter with a pillar of flesh that struck the side of the boat 3 times. No one saw its head. But the deckhands refused to fish for weeks. One man jumped overboard the next day, saying only the eye followed me. There are no photos, only trembling handwriting in the ship's journal. What frightens you more, what we've seen or what we've forgotten? When a sailor dies at sea, the tradition is to lower a wreath and whisper their name to the water, as if the ocean must be reminded of who it took. But I believe it already knows. I believe it keeps their names, their voices, their fears, and perhaps their final screams. We begin this series not to prove these creatures exist, but to show you why they've never truly disappeared. They were not erased. They were simply submerged. And in part 2, we will resurface the most feared of all the beasts, so large it could drown empires, so quiet it left no trace, and so enduring its name has outlived entire civilizations. The Kraken. Prepare yourself. The story is far from over. Before men gave it a name, they gave it fear. The Kraken. A word that pulls the breath from your throat. a creature born of cold and silence, known not by what it left behind, but by the ships that never returned. To understand the Kraken, you must first understand the age it ruled, an age when the sea was a living mythology. The boundaries of the known world ended not with coastlines, but with superstition, shadow, and salt. Maps were drawn with dragons, and between those dragons water. Off the coasts of Norway and Greenland, fishermen told stories in the dark, not because they sought to entertain, but because they needed to remember. They spoke of whirlpools that rose from still water, of arms longer than masts, of eyes that blinked once and swallowed an entire crew. They called it Hafgufa, the sea mist, the hiding hunger. Later, it would be known as Kraken. Unlike Leviathan, Kraken was not divine. It was not a beast of fire or judgment. It was the deep made physical, a creature so vast that men mistook its back for an island. They landed, lit fires, rested, and then the island moved. The earliest texts that hint at the Kraken come from the Norse treatise, Konungsskogja, the King's Mirror, written in the 13th century. It describes a creature so large it could be mistaken for land, and so dangerous that its surfacing created maelstroms, capable of dragging entire fleets to the bottom. It did not hunt like other predators. It did not chase, it waited. This, perhaps, is the truest terror of the Kraken. Not its size, not its power, but its patience. It taught sailors that danger does not always roar. Sometimes it breathes quietly beneath you. There were reports, hundreds of them. Some credible, others too strange to catalogue. In 1752, a Danish ship near the Faroe Islands reported great shadow rising beneath their hull, followed by sudden silence. The sea turned thick. Then a massive limb coiled around the rudder. The helmsman froze. By the time the crew reacted, they were adrift, steering, disabled, the wind gone. The ship returned, barely. No one spoke for days. In 1801, the French corvette Alecton encountered what the captain described as a pulsating, flesh-colored mass with writhing extremities. They fired cannon. It sank. Later that night, the ship's medic carved strange suction marks from the wooden railing and preserved them in a glass jar. It was sent to the French Academy. No response ever came. What is the Kraken? A squid, a mutation, a relic? Or is it something the sea hides not out of malice but mercy? There are those who say the Kraken was merely misunderstood, that it fed only on fish, and its chaos was incidental, that its maelstroms were defense, not attack. But misunderstanding does not soothe the drowned. The Kraken may not have intelligence as we understand it, but it has memory. It knows the taste of ships, the sound of hulls cracking, the fluttering heartbeat of men gripped by awe and terror. And then nothing. Silence. It has been drawn in medieval manuscripts, depicted in cathedral etchings, whispered about in port taverns in every tongue of the North Atlantic. Always the same image, limbs too many to count, coiled around splinters of hope. Carl Linnaeus, the father of modern taxonomy, briefly included the Kraken in his early editions of Systema Naturae. He later retracted it, but why include it at all? Because the reports were too numerous, too consistent, too human. There's something primal in the Kraken, something that speaks not to logic but to dread, not to science but to instinct. The kind of fear that wakes you in the middle of the night while sailing because the ship groaned and no wind moved the sails. The kind of fear that makes you imagine things moving beneath your boat, even in calm water. Or maybe they're not imagined. Modern science has confirmed the existence of Architeuthis ducks, the giant squid. With tentacles up to 40 feet and eyes as large as dinner plates, it is a creature beyond imagination. It lives in the twilight zones of the sea. It scars sperm whales in battle. And yet, it still feels small, because the Kraken is not just a squid. It is the fear of what else might be, of what hides just one layer deeper. There are trenches in the ocean so deep, if Mount Everest were placed inside them, it would be completely submerged. No light, no warmth, only pressure, cold, and time. What lives there? We do not know. But we know something. In 2003, researchers on a Japanese submarine recorded sonar readings of a moving mass 300 meters below them, faster than any known animal. They called it the shadow beneath the trench. When they surfaced, the water was still. They never dove again. Could that be Kraken or something older? We often say legends are born from ignorance. But what if legends are born from memory? Perhaps the Kraken no longer lives in the sea, but in us. In the way we hesitate near deep water. In the way silence makes us shiver more than thunder. In the way children draw monsters without ever having seen one. A shared wound, a collective knowing, that once we were prey. And the sea has not forgotten. In the next part of our journey, we descend further not into myth, but into places that were never named. Places where creatures live without title, where fear cannot speak, and stories cannot survive. They are the unknown ones, and they are waiting. It is said that when God created the sea, he chained a serpent within it. Its name was Leviathan. The Leviathan is not merely a creature, it is a boundary, a living limit, a breathing edge between the world of men and the world of the divine. In the book of Job, the Leviathan is described with dread and awe. It is untouchable by harpoons, its breath ignites flame, and its eyes gleam like the breaking dawn. Nothing on earth is its equal, the text proclaims a creature without fear. That line tells us everything. Leviathan is not feared. Leviathan is fear. Across the ancient world, this figure of the sea serpent emerges again and again. In Hebrew scripture, it is a monster defeated by God and reserved for the end of days. In Ugaritic myth, it was known as Lotan, a seven-headed dragon vanquished by Baal. In Babylonian tradition, Tiamat rose from the sea to wage war against creation itself. The names differ. The terror remains. Why does every ancient culture speak of a serpentine force dwelling in the deep, threatening not only boats, but the very structure of the cosmos? Because Leviathan is not a monster. It is memory. It represents chaos before order, the vastness before boundaries, the scream before silence. To call it a sea creature is to miss the point. It is the embodiment of the sea's wrath, unpredictability, and divine depth. Leviathan coils through scripture like a warning, yet it is also sacred. According to some Talmudic texts, God will slay the beast at the end of time, and its flesh will feed the righteous in the world to come. Its skin will become the tent of a new heaven. Even in destruction, it serves a purpose. Imagine a being so massive that it wraps the earth, so old that its bones predate our gods, so silent that its breath is mistaken for tide. In the Zohar, a foundational Kabbalistic text, Leviathan is said to be genderless, its balance preserved to prevent it from breeding. There was only ever one Leviathan. That alone makes it holy. Not a species, a singular will. The early church fathers saw Leviathan as a symbol of Satan, the ultimate force of chaos. In medieval Christian art, it appears as a gate to hell, a beast whose mouth becomes the jaws of the underworld. Yet it is never shown defeated, only restrained. It was never about slaying the monster. It was about surviving its presence. In this way, Leviathan mirrors the ocean itself. You cannot fight it. You cannot tame it. You can only acknowledge it and hope it does not turn toward you. Some believe Leviathan is buried in the Mariana Trench, its body entwined in molten rock and deep-sea silence. Others say it is not physical at all, but spiritual. A vibration, a disturbance, a presence you feel when waves crash with no wind, when fish scatter from nothing, when the ocean stares back. In 1911, a Russian Orthodox priest shipwrecked off Kamchatka wrote a final letter soaked in brine. In it, he described a sound like God breathing through his teeth and a shape in the water that had no end, only direction. The letter was found, he was not. What would it mean if Leviathan was real? Would we worship it, fear it, deny it? Or would we, as our ancestors did, build temples not of stone but of story? This is what Leviathan demands, not sacrifice but recognition. That we are small, that we do not control the waters, that sometimes silence is a mouth holding back a roar. There are those who suggest Leviathan is symbolic of the deep unconscious, the vast part of our mind we cannot access. that it is the psychological sea beneath our waking life, and to confront it is to confront ourselves. Perhaps that's true, but I believe Leviathan is more than symbol. It is the pause between lightning and thunder, the stillness before the wave, the gaze of the abyss returned, and sometimes I think it stirs. In the silence of modern sonar scans, we have found anomalies moving masses the size of islands. In 1997, the NOAA recorded the bloop, a mysterious ultra-low-frequency sound in the Pacific Ocean. It did not match any known geological or biological pattern. Some joked it was a giant squid. Others did not laugh. Leviathan does not need proof to exist. Its reality is stitched into the way we speak of the sea, into warnings passed from father to son, into lullabies that do not soothe but remind. If the Kraken is the terror of the sea's surface, Leviathan is its soul. It waits, not to rise and devour, but to remain, to be the unspoken rule behind the world's tides. Its role is not to kill, but to humble, to show us that beneath all knowledge there is still depth, and in that depth, still mystery, and in that mystery, something with eyes. In Part 4, we sail past the known names beyond Kraken, beyond Leviathan. There are stories without words, creatures without scripture, and shapes lost to maps. They are not remembered because those who saw them did not return. They are the unknown ones. We go forward now, not with courage but with reverence. There are no names for what comes next, only silence. Long after the Kraken had been mapped in margins and Leviathan chained in scripture, sailors still returned with tales not of creatures they could name, but of things they could not describe. Things without form, without pattern, without logic. These were not monsters in the traditional sense. They had no myth, no story, no temple. They simply existed, and their presence defied meaning. Some called them the unknown ones. Every ocean has a place, a patch of water avoided even by the boldest crews, where compasses fail, where birds refuse to cross, where wind dies without warning. It's there in those shadowed stretches of sea that these things wait, not like predators, but like memories unfinished. There is an old sailor's saying in the Baltic, "When the water forgets how to move, it remembers how to dream." And in those dreams, it sees them. Accounts of the unknown ones are fragmented, incoherent. The notes of madmen scribbled on salt-ripped parchment. Testimonies whispered to clergy by fevered survivors who would not sail again. Half sentences. Drawings of shapes with no symmetry. A recurring word, watching. In 1674, the merchant ship Vesper returned to port with only one man alive. He had bound his wrists with rope soaked in oil. When questioned, he repeated one phrase, "Don't let it look at you. Don't let it know your name." He died that night. The ship's logs were blank past the 9th day at sea, but someone had scratched a circle over every compass aboard, a circle with no center. In another account, a vessel charting the Southern Ocean described a fog that bled upward from the sea, through which shapes moved in silence. Not swimming, not drifting, simply being. The navigator wrote, "I saw nothing, but the nothing saw me." What are these creatures? Are they older than myth or newer than memory? Some have theorized that they are remnant survivors of an age, before narrative, before language, before classification. Creatures that never fit the categories of beast or god, and thus slipped through time unnoticed. But what does it mean to witness something your mind cannot hold? One captain reported a mouth made of waves that opened as their ship passed a specific latitude near the Indian Ocean. No attack followed, just the realization that they were seen. The crew abandoned ship 2 days later. The hull was found drifting, no sign of damage, but every lantern aboard had shattered inward. Can a thing exist without a shape? Can terror be real if it leaves no mark? In 1931, an Argentine explorer recorded an encounter in the South Pacific. He claimed their ship entered a pocket of dead ocean, no current, no wind, no sound. Then a low vibration echoed through the deck. The men dropped to their knees, weeping. They described a pressure like being watched by something both massive and hollow. One man was found praying to his reflection in the water. Another refused to leave his cabin, whispering, "It heard me think." The expedition ended. The records were buried. But the sea remembers. What if these creatures do not live in the sea, but through it? What if water is not their body, but their voice? There are petroglyphs on the cliffs of Old Norse settlements, spiral patterns etched beside symbols of boats. These spirals match drawings found in Polynesian caves and Inuit sea stone carvings. A shared geometry, a shared warning. We often think of sea monsters as things with flesh and bone. But what if the unknown ones are made of shadow, current silence? What if they are not beasts at all, but ruptures? Errors in the story of the sea. There are myths from the Far East of ocean spirits that erase memory, that sailors return to shore unable to recall their voyage. They speak fluently, eat normally, but know nothing of where they've been. In 1812, a Portuguese whaler returned to port after 3 months. The entire crew had aged visibly, hair gray, skin pale. But their journal entries ended after the first week, replaced by indecipherable symbols. A priest was called to investigate. He entered the ship's hold and fled moments later, screaming. He never spoke again. To this day, the boat rests in a dry dock under lock. We are taught to fear what we see, but perhaps we should fear what erases seeing. The unknown ones may never be named because naming gives shape, and they defy all forms. They are voids given presence. They do not attack. They observe. They do not roar. They resonate. Some say they are the ocean's dreams. Others say they are its forgotten children. I say they are its truths. In maps they are drawn only by absence. In songs they are silences. In prayers they are what we hope never hears us. No creature survives untouched by time, except that which is never known. In the next part we journey toward light, but not salvation. We will explore sea legends born from fire-burning waters, volcanic islands, and monsters that rise from molten birthplaces. Part 5 is the domain of the fireborn creatures, birthed not from abyss, but from flame. The sea of fire awaits. The sea is not always blue. There are places where it burns. Where water forgets it is water. Where steam becomes smoke and waves dance with fire. In those places, monsters are not born, they erupt. They are the fireborn. Unlike the Kraken or Leviathan, these creatures are not bound to darkness or silence. They announce themselves with fury. They are not watchers, they are warnings. Throughout the ages, volcanic islands have erupted from the ocean, as if the earth itself was birthing monsters. Sailors feared these places, not just for the flames, but for what walked through them. Ancient Polynesian navigators spoke of Mo'o-Kane, a dragon of molten scale who swam beneath lava, tides his breath turning rain to ash. The Hawaiians knew of Pele's beasts, fiery serpents and dog-like guardians, who emerged during eruptions, their eyes glowing like coals. In Mediterranean legend, the Aeolian Islands were home to Typhon's remnants, creatures that bled flame and screamed in sulfur. It was said that when the sea hissed something beneath, it breathed heat. Even the Norse spoke of Eikthrunar's curse, when the stag of Valhalla shed its burning antlers into the sea, birthing flame-eyed fish that swam only under blood moons. Not myths, they insisted. Warnings. There is something fundamentally unnatural about fire on water. It challenges our most basic belief that flame and sea are opposites. But where tectonic plates collide and the earth splits open, that rule is undone. In 1863, a merchant vessel near the Tongan archipelago reported sailing through water that steamed. The captain described seeing horned shadows moving beneath orange waves and heard cries that came without wind. The ship's hull warped from the heat, yet no visible flame was found. They left offerings on the bow. The sea cooled. They survived. In 1937, a Japanese research vessel passed over the volcanic vents of the Pacific Ring. For 3 minutes, every instrument failed. The crew described red light rising from the depths, and something coiled in it, something glowing from within. A creature or a current. They called it Akaryu, the red dragon. Even modern science confirms the presence of hydrothermal vents, undersea geysers that spew superheated water rich in minerals. Life thrives there in complete darkness, near boiling temperatures. Giant tube worms, albino crabs, creatures alien to surface biology. What else lives there? What has always lived there? There are petroglyphs in southern Chile that depict serpents of flame and fish with fire tongues. These drawings predate written language, and yet identical symbols are found in Indonesian caves, worlds apart cultures unconnected, yet bound by flame and fear. We often view sea monsters as cold, but heat is no less terrifying. The Fireborn are creatures of hunger. Their appearance heralds change. They emerge during eruption storms or blood tides, not to hunt, but to remind that the sea is not ours. There's a legend in Sicily of Il Cavallo di Fuoco, the fire horse, said to gallop across the surface of the Strait of Messina when the volcano rumbles. Its mane crackles like lava. Its hooves leave no splash, only steam. To see it is to witness change. Within weeks, the coastline alters, as if it redraws the earth with each step. More haunting is the tale of the Infernata, a creature whispered of in coastal Portugal, described as a man-shaped being, of molten skin drifting silently toward ships during night fog. Those who see it are said to dream in flame for the rest of their lives. Some go mad. Others become priests. One survivor claimed he spoke to it. He said it asked what I had done with my fire. Perhaps these beings are not monsters, but memories of the earth before it cooled, of creation's fury, of the first breath that was smoke, not air. There are reports from satellite imagery plumes of heat rising from ocean regions with no known volcanic activity. Glows seen beneath the surface unlinked to geothermal readings. One marine biologist described a pod of whales veering hundreds of miles off course to avoid a zone that smelled wrong. What instinct guided them? Some suggest the Fireborn are not creatures, but ruptures in the sea's memory, that each flame is a scar, a reminder of when the world was still shaping itself. Others believe they are guardians, emissaries of balance, that where ice grows too strong they rise to burn, that they are not here to destroy, but to restore. In 2001, divers near Santorini reported finding what appeared to be scales embedded in cooled magma. Each was etched with spiral markings warm to the touch. They brought one to the surface. It dissolved in air. Whatever it was, it did not belong above. We speak of these beings because we must, not to understand them, but to accept them. Fire in the sea is not an error. It is a truth we are taught to ignore, but they do not ignore us. The Fireborn are not silent. They speak in eruptions. They mark the sea in red. They reshape the world without asking. In the next part of our journey, we turn to the coldest corners of the world, the polar oceans, the ice-fanged currents, and the monsters that dwell beneath frost. We have seen fire, now we will feel ice. Prepare for the frozen abyss. There is a silence in the cold that is older than sound. The frozen abyss is not merely a place, it is a verdict. A realm where time slows, thoughts crystallize, and monsters do not rage. They wait. Here in the high latitudes where the ocean turns to glass and the sun barely rises, sailors speak not of the Kraken or Leviathan, but of things with no breath, of eyes buried in centuries of ice, of songs that echo beneath frozen waters. The creatures of the polar seas are not beasts of flame or fury, they are fossils of fear, preserved horrors, echoes of creation locked beneath 1,000 winters. They are the frozen ones. In Inuit legend there is Kalupalik, a humanoid sea being with green skin and long hair, who drags disobedient children into the icy deep. Her skin is cold, but her whisper is warm. She hums beneath the ice. Fishermen swear they've heard her lullabies, soft, rhythmic, just beyond the reach of comprehension. Many believe that once you understand her song, you never return. In Russian Arctic folklore, there is Morozver, the ice beast, said to emerge during polar night. Its breath freezes sails. Its antlers are made of bone and frost. It moves beneath the ice, like a thought left unfinished. Unlike fire creatures that announce themselves, the frozen ones arrive, through absence of warmth, of direction, of memory. The Franklin expedition disappeared in 1845, seeking the Northwest Passage. 2 ships, 129 men. Gone. Decades later, their remains were found perfectly preserved, their journals ending abruptly. One note mentioned a presence watching from the blue, though no description followed. Just the phrase, "It sang to us," and we forgot how to speak. In Antarctica, scientists drilling into Lake Vostok sealed beneath 4 kilometers of ice found anomalies, unexplainable heat signatures, echoes, a brief fluctuation in salinity. One sensor recorded movement, a large, slow vibration. Days later, the equipment was gone. They never spoke of it again. It is easy to dismiss these tales as cold-induced hallucinations. But across polar cultures, Inuit, Sami, Chukchi, Evenki stories persist of beings in the ice serpents with translucent flesh, fish with glowing mouths, creatures that mimic voices of the lost. They share traits: they do not breathe, they do not bleed, they do not chase, they remember. In the 1700s, a Norwegian whaler claimed his crew encountered Isger ice animals that move through fog and icebergs. He described them as being made of silence, and said his crewmates froze, not from temperature, but from knowing. From knowing what? He died before he could answer. Perhaps these creatures are born from isolation itself. The sea at the poles is old and uninterrupted. There beneath miles of ice, ecosystems evolve with no light, no contact, no escape. There are records of jellyfish the size of sleds, worms with antifreeze in their blood, fish that turn to glass in the cold. All real, all catalogued. What else waits deeper? In 1954, a Soviet submarine passing under the Arctic ice reported sonar readings of something massive keeping pace beside them. No visual contact, just pressure, just sound. When they turned, it stopped. The sonar officer wrote, "The sea became a mirror and we saw ourselves too clearly." What does it mean for a monster to be made of stillness? What if these beings are not physical, but reflections of fears that manifest in cold? The way light bends through ice, perhaps emotion does too. Perhaps terror echoes. There are those who believe the frozen ones are not alive in the traditional sense, that they are memories caught in thermal drift, alive only when acknowledged. That each time we speak of them, they stir. One sailor from Greenland told of an encounter where the water turned thick, not frozen, but dense. Like walking into a dream, he said. Shapes moved slowly. A face emerged, his own aged, staring back. He never went to sea again. Could it be that the ice does not trap these beings, but Trollsky preserves ski with them, that we are not discovering them, but awakening them? Ancient carvings found on Svalbard's coastal stones show massive spiral forms with dozens of eyes. One shows a man offering his hand to the ice. Behind him, nothing. Before him, everything. We speak of sea monsters as hostile, but the frozen ones are not aggressive. They are patient. Their terror is not in the attack, but in the endurance. They wait for the thaw, for the trespass, for us. A Chilean legend speaks of the Hielo Madre Astor, the Ice Mother, who sleeps beneath the Antarctic Circle. It is said she dreams of silence, and if her dream is disturbed, the world will freeze again. A myth, perhaps. But in 2012, a diver in polar gear dropped below an ice shelf and returned shaken. He described hearing breathing his own at first, then slower, deeper, not matching his lungs. He turned off his regulator. The sound remained. Frozen creatures do not chase. They do not roar. They reflect. And in their reflection we confront what we fear most: stillness, isolation, ourselves. In the next chapter, we turn away from water entirely. We enter the world of those who do not swim but walk, who rise from tides to stand upon land, who take shape in legend and body. The Shorewalkers are next. The sea does not end at the shore, it transforms. Prepare for part 7. There is a moment when the sea no longer recedes, when it chooses instead to come forward, not as wave, but as presence. The Shorewalkers are not creatures of the deep. They are not serpents or shadows or echoing roars. They are men who forgot they were men, or perhaps something else that remembered. They rise from the tide not with rage but with purpose. In coastal mythologies from every corner of the world, stories abound of beings who step from the sea onto land. Not shipwreck survivors, not gods, but in-betweeners. Hybrids, silent trespassers. In Irish folklore, there are the Selkies, seal people, who remove their skins to walk as humans. But their eyes remain wrong, deep, and they always return to the water, unless trapped, unless loved. In West African tales, the Mami Wada walks the shore at night, her steps leaving no prints, her eyes reflecting the moon. She offers wealth, beauty, power, at a price. She is not beast, she is not woman, she is sea. In Scandinavian sagas, there are the Havsra, sea spirits, who take human form to lure the lonely, speaking in riddles and never blinking. They come ashore not because they must, but because they can. And we invite them. It begins with footprints in wet sand that lead inland, with driftwood arranged in symbols only seen from above, with fog that moves against the wind. In 1903, the coastal village of Travanport in England recorded a 3-day silence. No birds, no wind, no tides. On the 4th day, 12 sets of human-sized prints emerged from the sea and moved through the village. No damage, no theft, just presence. The villagers stayed indoors, doors locked, windows shuttered. At dawn, the footprints returned to the water. But in their place, 12 dead fish were left on each doorstep. Each one had a human tooth embedded in its spine. Some say it was a warning, others say it was thanks. In Japan, fishermen tell of the umibozu, a massive monk-like figure that appears near the coast during calm seas. But there are also lesser ones, smaller walkers, ones that step onto beaches and bow to shrines before vanishing, an offering returned, or a presence acknowledged. The shorewalkers are not always malevolent, but they are never fully benign. They carry with them the weight of tide, of change, of reminder. In 1952, a lighthouse keeper in Nova Scotia recorded seeing a man of the sea walking the rocks during a storm. The man stood for hours unmoving, watching. When approached, he left no tracks, but the rocks beneath his feet were dry in the rain. The keeper left his post the next day. What do these beings want? Some believe they are messengers, emissaries from the deep, warning us not to forget the seas packed with land. That balance must be upheld. Others think they are judges, that they emerge when coastal harm is done, when waters are poisoned, fish over-harvested, reefs destroyed. They come not to punish, but to observe and to remember. There are drawings in coastal caves of humanoid figures with seaweed hair and coral mouths, always facing inward, as if watching. In Chilean myths, there are the Camahuedo horned sea creatures who walk ashore to seek their missing kin. Their steps crack the ground. Their breath salts the air. They walk until they find. Then they return. Some are said to never find. In 1989, a diver's camera was found on a beach in Alaska. The footage showed him entering a submerged cave, narrow and pulsing with current. Then, silence. The final frame was a shadow stepping toward him upright, with eyes glowing white. No body was recovered. The locals built a cairn by the beach, and no one swam there again. What separates a sea monster from a god? Is it shape-size power? Or is it simply distance? The shorewalkers break that distance. They remind us that we are never truly inland, that the sea walks too, and perhaps that is the point. They appear at dusk. They vanish before dawn. Sometimes they knock. Sometimes they do not. Sometimes they stand just beyond the waterline and wait. In Croatian tales, the Morski, Čovjek leaves gifts at the edge of towns, fish curled into spirals, stones stacked in impossible balance. If the villagers disturb them, sickness follows. If left alone, abundance comes. One elder said they bring balance, they bring memory. In the Philippines, some tell of Sirena, mermaid-like beings who do not sing, but hum. The hum is low, constant. Those who hear it report dreams of walking endlessly through wet streets toward the sea. Some never wake. The shorewalkers are a bridge between sea and soil, between fear and reverence. They are not monsters. They are reminders that the boundary is not fixed, that the land was once ocean, and maybe again. In the next part, we dive deeper into the spiritual dimension, into those monsters not of body but of soul, sea beings that tempt, deceive, and possess. The drowned spirits await. Part 8 will not be kind. The sea does not forget the dead. Where we bury our lost, the ocean collects its own, not in rows or ritual, but in silence. And sometimes the silence breaks. These are not creatures, not beasts or gods. These are remnants, feelings, whispers with weight. They are the drowned spirits. From the earliest days, seafarers believed that those who died at sea did not sleep. They drifted, half memory, half vengeance, caught between breath and current, between death and tide, and sometimes they return. In Greek myth, the Nereids were gentle sea nymphs, but some grew vengeful when ignored. In contrast, the Lemures, restless spirits, were said to wander near shipwrecks, invisible but felt. Cold air, wet footsteps, a sense of being watched from below. In Slavic folklore, there are the Rusalki, once drowned women, now spectral beings who lure men with their sorrow. Their song is not seductive, it is mournful, a lament. And if you pity them, you follow. You walk into the waves, you do not return. In the Philippines, there is Shananawala sa Alonshi, who was lost to the waves, said to appear during typhoons drifting toward fishing boats. Her face is veiled in seaweed, and her voice calls not for help, but for memory. To hear her is to remember someone you never met, to feel grief that is not your own. In the 1800s, British sailors spoke of the lament tide, a phenomenon where entire crews would wake at once to distant singing. Some would weep. Some would walk overboard in trance. One survivor carved this into the mast. She sang with my mother's voice, but I never had a mother. These spirits are not malevolent by nature, but they are powerful. They carry pain like a current, subtle, strong, and ever pulling. In Iceland, the Draugr, undead sea dwellers, guard treasures buried in shipwrecks. They are not ghosts in the wind, but solid, soggy bodies filled with seawater and resentment. They walk the ocean floor with heavy steps, dragging chains and grief. One tale speaks of a Draugr who climbed onto the docks each new moon, dripping and silent, to sit beside an empty chair. It never spoke, but the townsfolk left it tea. It left nothing behind until the day a child vanished and the chair stayed wet. In Caribbean legends, Duppies roam the shoreline during storm season. They speak with the voices of the lost and wear the faces of the drowned. They knock on windows, asking to come home. Some let them in. In 1934, a fishing crew near Nova Scotia hauled in a net tangled with human bones. Among them was a jaw with gold fillings, but no known missing sailor matched the dental records. The captain buried it at sea again. That night, every compass spun. They heard knocking from beneath the hull. By morning, the bones were back on deck. There are temples submerged in Southeast Asia where divers report strange warmth in cold water. Statues weep. Walls bleed salt. One researcher saw her own reflection blink while her eyes were shut. She left the profession. The drowned spirits live in these cracks between worlds, between pulses, between waves. Sometimes they do not appear as people at all. In Polynesia, the Aumakua. Ancestral spirits can appear as fish turtles or sharks. But when angered, they become storms. Entire fleets have vanished after killing a shark that watched too long. We mistake form for intent. These spirits do not care for logic or fairness. They move like memory, personal, erratic, sacred. In Chile, El Mar Sin Nombre, the nameless sea is said to hold every soul lost without burial. Each wave is a name forgotten, each tide a scream unfinished. One sailor who drifted near it said the wind whispered stories in 100 voices. He was alone, but he felt watched, held, judged. I was never more loved or more condemned. The sea buries without casket, and yet we know it keeps record. Old wrecks hold more than wood and rust. They hold fear, regret, and sometimes they whisper. Divers have surfaced, speaking new languages. One forgot his wife's face, but remembered the name of a girl, drowned in 1623. Are these spirits, or are they reminders of what we owe the sea, of who we forget? In Cornish legends, there is the Sea Bride, a ghost in a pale dress who walks the cliffs during fog. She never looks up. She never stops. But if you speak to her, she answers with your own voice. And suddenly, you forget why you came. The drowned spirits are not evil. They are weight, they are gravity, they pull, not to kill but to share. Their pain, their story, their sea. In the next chapter, we face the final truth, not of myth, but of origin now, of beings that came before stories, before time, the Primordials. They wait below still. Prepare for part 9. Before monsters had names, they had purpose. Before myths took shape, there were them. The Primordials are not merely the oldest sea monsters. They are not subjects of stories. They are the origin of story. The reason men looked into the deep and trembled. The first cause, the forgotten gods. They are what the ocean remembers. In every culture, fragments of them remain echoes of something we've tried to forget. Beings not born of flesh, but of pressure, silence, and time. In Mesopotamian myth, there is Tiamat, a dragon-like goddess of the salt sea from whose body the world was carved. She was not slain by man, but used. Her death created order, but her bones perhaps still stir. In Norse myth, Aegir ruled the sea, but feared the things below, even he could not command. Beneath Yggdrasil, there were wells older than the gods. In them, something waited, unnamed, undared. In Polynesian creation stories, the ocean came first, then came sound-light gods. But never did the sea lose its authority. It merely watched, and waits still. The Primordials are not angry. They are not kind. They are inevitable. We find their traces in the cracks a trench deeper than light can reach. A volcanic vent where life grows in defiance of logic. A hum that moves through water but has no source. In 1997, the Noe recorded a sound they called the bloop. It was organic, massive, louder than anything previously heard, and it came from nowhere. Then it stopped. Some say it was tectonic. Others say it turned over in its sleep. In the 1600s, a fishing fleet off the coast of Greenland reported seeing a continent that moved. A land mass of rock and coral that rose, turned, and vanished beneath the waves. It left behind steam and silence. Cartographers removed it from their maps. In South American lore, the Yakuruna, masters of underwater cities, report to an unnamed being they do not worship, but serve. A creature whose shape is described only as unseen, but undeniable. One shaman called it the thought before breath. In the Mariana Trench, pressure should crush all, yet life thrives. And strange pulses are recorded consistent, deliberate, cyclical. As if something is dreaming. What sleeps that deep? What dreams under 7 miles of silence? A fossil found in 2004 in Central Asia showed a sea creature with no evolutionary lineage, no known relatives, no matching anatomy. It bore markings, lines, spirals, not natural, not random. A language, a signature. It was buried far from any sea. In ancient Greece, Orpheus spoke of a hymn heard only in water that called to the old world. A melody that predated words. The song of the unformed. The Primordials do not speak, they resonate. Their presence is not seen but felt in the pressure behind your eyes, while diving the sudden fear in calm waters. The way a bay becomes silent at night without cause. They are not creatures, they are thresholds. They do not appear to warn us. They appear when we draw too near. In 1889, a diver in the Aegean Sea claimed to find a doorway on the seafloor, an arch made of black stone pulsing. He never found it again, but he never dove again. He painted it daily until his death. The door never changed. Behind it, nothing, or everything. In Slavic myth, the Moriana is the sea's will made flesh, sometimes woman, sometimes mist, sometimes storm. But even she prays before descending to the deep places. There are no names for the Primordials, because names imply understanding, names grant power, and these beings do not yield. Some believe Atlantis did not fall, it was taken, absorbed, reclaimed by that which had grown tired of watching. The Primordials are not what came first. They are what remains true after all else fades. At the bottom of Lake Baikal, sensors picked up seismic patterns, forming repeating mathematical sequences. Not random, not natural, as if the lake were thinking, or remembering. What can a body of water remember? Only that which never left. The sea is not a backdrop. It is not a setting. It is not even a home. It is a presence, and deep within it, beneath all story and scream, sleep the first truths. The primordials do not knock, they do not roar, they do not chase. They exist, and in that existence is terror. Not because they will awaken, but because they may not need to. We end this journey with what began all journeys, the fear of the unknown. The whisper that draws us to the shore and warns us never to cross. And yet we did. In the final part, we return to the surface not to escape, but to reflect. The ocean does not end in horror, it ends in silence. And perhaps in understanding. Prepare for part 10, the return to shore. There comes a moment always that we must return to shore. After the tales, the storms, the monsters and myths, we arrive where we began with our feet in the sand, looking outward wondering, was it all real? The answer lies not in what we've seen, but in what we've felt. The sea changes us. Even when we return unchanged in body, we are never the same inside. We began this journey with legends, names like Kraken, Leviathan, and the unknown ones. But what we discovered was something older, stranger, deeper. Each creature, each whisper, each spirit beneath the waves was not just a horror or wonder, but a reflection of us, of our fear, our awe, our longing. Why do we look to the sea for monsters? Because the sea is the last true mirror. It is where we see power without arrogance, destruction without cruelty, beauty without reason. It humbles us. It reminds us that we are not alone, not just in life, but in memory. There are things out there that remember us, even if we do not remember them. And as we pull our boat ashore, dragging stories behind us like nets, we realize the sea is not finished. It watches. It waits. And sometimes it returns things we thought were lost. A song in the wind. A shadow in the mist. A name we do not recall but feel. There is comfort in this. Not all fear must wound. Not all myths are warnings. Some are invitations. To listen, to wonder, to speak less, to feel more. So as you sit now, perhaps in a quiet room, perhaps beneath the sound of distant waves, I ask, which story stayed with you? Was it the sleeping beasts, the walking spirits, the drowning gods, or the moment you realized the sea is alive with memory? We would love to know. Share in the comments what legend moved you the most, or what sea tale lives in your own memory. Perhaps your words, too, will drift outward, echoing into the dark, into the deep, where another listener waits. The ocean has heard every story, and it is always ready for one more. Thank you for sailing with us. Until the tide turns again, we remain, watching, listening, returning. The sea is never far, and neither are its stories.